John Crowley directed Black Mirror Beyond the Sea. I'm Matt Noble of Gold Derby. I want to start things off, John, by asking you, what did you find most compelling about this story?
I think I found it a horrifying and compelling read. I couldn't pull my eyes away from it the first time I read it. And I think I found the idea at the core of it about it being like a sort of grim thought experiment on the nature of a marriage or on the nature of a relationship that felt like it sort of transcended some of the genre playfulness that Charlie was also handling in the script, and that's what sort of gave me an anchor or a way into it as a piece of writing.
What was the biggest challenge for you in telling this story?
I mean, there's the obvious technical challenge of the spaceship and making that believable, making it not look silly, I guess. And one of the fun things about it was the sort of game of contrasts that we were able to play between the natural world, the real world of Massachusetts and California, and the isolated, cold outer reaches of space, and that was great fun. Just realizing it took quite a bit of work, obviously. And I think that there's the obvious. Anytime you do anything with a couple of isolated spacemen in a ship, there is the elephant in the room of Kubrick that's sort of sitting in the corner of the room that you're trying to usher out of the room because you're not going to come out on top in that world. So it took a while for us to figure out what our own approach to it was going to be, as it were. That wasn't going to be referencing lots of other great films that we have, grown up watching.
Yeah. And how would you describe that approach that you landed on?
Well, for me, it was essentially naturalistic, which is to say, trying to figure out the every shot from the inside out, trying to figure it out from an emotional standpoint first, and then through discussions with Stuart Bentley, my DP, and Udo Kramer, fabulous designer, figuring out what the emotional surfaces around these men, and then what their contexts back on Earth should look and feel like. That was the approach, really. Is once you know what something should feel like and what the emotional essence of a scene is, you can plot your way forward then, rather than just saying it looks cool or it's a really interesting image.
Yeah. Now, Josh Hartnett and Aaron Paul play these two astronauts that are out on space on this year-long mission, and they can sort of inhabit the consciousness of replicas of their bodies back on Earth. And you talked about the sort of, I guess the three of you were on that spaceship, the director and the two actors. And when I interviewed Josh Hartnett a week or two ago, he said you three just try to keep pushing it weirder and weirder. What was one of the weirdest moments on that spaceship?
I mean, I think the idea of him post realizing what's happened to his family on Earth, sitting in amongst these plants, this kind of strange room, transferring a chunk of beautiful earthbound nature with a man snapped in two by grief for the most unnatural deed you could imagine happening. That's pretty close to it, I would say, right there. So shooting the material where Josh was on his own in the ship, and then subsequently even where Aaron was on his own while, the replica was down on Earth, was fascinating and quite paranoid making for them. And that ship was a wonderful sort of womb-like springboard for them, because it was so claustrophobic and difficult for us all to move around in physically, you know. It really helped them though.
As a director, how does it affect you being in that sort of environment and telling that story? Does it shape the way you approach things or think about stuff?
My back was sore from stepping in and out of that shit dozens of times every hour. But no, look, you know, the shooting of the violent scene was the one that affected us most deeply, I think. You know, the ship itself was just a sort of glorious, dark playground, but it was very, very exciting when we were shooting it. And I could feel that shot by shot, you know, the performances were growing beautifully. So no, I was sort of in that slightly worrying way, able to walk away from it at the end of the day and go back to work the next day, you know, thankfully.
Did you learn anything through making this feature?
I hadn't played in the sort of sandpit of science fiction before, and I was delirious with joy doing it, if I'm honest. The actual playfulness of realizing it visually and the fun of that was extraordinary. You know, it felt to me that there was an opportunity to pitch our tent in a slightly deeper and maybe, I don't say darker, but a slightly deeper emotional territory with the Black Mirror. And that was sort of rather exciting, especially in the work with Aaron and Kate, and then how that got reflected back with Josh and Aaron on the ship. And it sort of read, there was echoes of the script when I read it first. It almost felt like a Greek tragedy to me. You know, it felt it had the directness and cleanness of just these dreadful events that start and just keep going and roll to the bottom of the hill and destroy everybody in their wake. And you're just left reflecting on, you know, the smallness of men in all senses at the end of it. So I, you know, being able to go after realizing something like that in that environment was thrilling. That you could hold that kind of tension between the form and content was exciting.
Yeah, you're sort of touching on a bit there, this Greek tragedy element to it. Do you think there's a lesson or a moral that comes from this story of Beyond the Sea?
I don't know that it's any really good story is reducible to one cozy moral.
Yeah.
You know, that would reduce it somewhat. I think that you know, by the end, you are certainly left judging the smallness of those male egos and their inability to detach from that sort of primal fight between them. That you could reflect on that for a while, and there's plenty of examples of that. And I think that's partly also why it was set when it was set, rather than in a contemporary setting. I mean, while it speaks to a lot of the sexual politics that we're very aware of now, you needed a certain kind of in David, a certain kind of masculine entitlement, and in Cliff, a certain kind of masculine shutdownness that sat more comfortably in a late 60s, sort of post Eisenhower, just emerging into the hippie era.
Yeah, no, that's cool. You said you found like it before. You said like it was like as you were reading it, you just found it hard to put down, sort of thing. When you get to the big twist at the ending, what was your reaction?
I think that that's where the sort of Greek reference came from in a strange way, because it had a horrible inevitability about it,
Mm.
and it had the most appalling symmetry
Yeah.
of something dreadful is visited upon somebody, and they literally consciously revisit that back on other people.
Yeah.
I found that appallingly truthful, and but without announcing its own self-importance. I mean, it sounds like I'm saying it was sort of, the House of Atreides, or
Mm.
it's also very entertaining, and there is a satirical element in it, and a playful element in it, and this sort of romance, a rapture, folded into it, and a portrait of a contemporary marriage that's lost its way in some sense,
Mm.
that is stoked back to life by the presence of a third person.
Mm.
There's a funny quote I came across when we were doing research on it. Not a funny quote, a very telling quote from Esther Perel, who's one of the sort of great relationship gurus, I guess. And she said, two's company, three's a marriage.
Mhm.
And that idea of the triangulation crystallizing that marriage back into life, where it had become a bit moribund, was very well sketched, I think, by the draft that we shot. By the time we got there with it.
Mm. Yeah. No, I don't know, like, if there's any sort of parallels with, like, or like connections of being a director where you're the person in the room that isn't seen, but capturing different characters and different sort of relationships and things.
Well, hopefully with a less toxic outcome.
Yes.
but yeah, it is a wonderful exploration of the sort of invisible effect of another person on the delicate ecosystem of a relationship. Absolutely, yeah. And how, the law of unintended consequences. You start off doing a good deed and it winds up very far from that.
Yeah. What do you love about filmmaking, John?
Oh God, the thrill of seeing an actor push through an emotional moment for the first time on camera. That's the thing that excites me and thrills me, and everybody in the room can feel it. And it's, you rehearse for it. We rehearsed for a week away before we started shooting. You rehearse in the morning, and always taking a sort of sense with the actors how much rehearsal is useful, how much isn't useful for them. But then when the camera turns on them, it is like a sort of Bunsen burner on a science experiment. It turns the heat up underneath the scene,
Yeah.
and that's when the magic starts happening.
Mm.
So for me to sit at the monitor and see that happening, and be essentially the first audience, and see in an actor's eyes something crack open and a moment of truth fly into the room, that's thrilling.
Mm.
That is thrilling. And with a wonderful DP like Stuart, who's so sensitive and to the actors and to the emotional content of the scene, and is trying with his craft to literally give a frame to that, and to literally give a context that will allow that to take flight. Then you get the perfect intersection between sort of almost industrial craft on the one side, and this invisible, slightly mysterious invitation to creativity and emotional truthfulness, that actors can conjure something from nothing.
Yeah.
That's what's thrilling.
Yeah, you won a BAFTA for your work on the film Brooklyn, for directing that piece, and at the end of the film, spoiler alert for you watching, the main character says, "You'll realize this is where your life is." Was there a moment where you realized that this was where your life was in relation to telling stories and making films?
Um, I would say there was two. There was the first one when I was in university and desperately wanting to be a director, the theater back then, but started off thinking I was going to be an actor and not enjoying acting. And then somebody had the idea of allowing me to direct a one-act play, which was The Bear by Chekhov, which I did with the student drama society. And the second I did that, the second I stopped trying to act and became a director, it was like a light bulb going on over my head. I'm like, aha, there you go, that's it, bang. It was the first thing I had done in my life that felt right. And then continued to be very happily for the next sort of 12 years in theater exclusively, but all the while longing to make a film. And I had a very similar moment, which was I had been asked to direct a short film of one of Beckett's plays. Back in 1999, there was a project to film all of Beckett's plays. Don't know if you remember. And they had some very illustrious directors lined up. And I managed to sneak in at the end to get my hands on a play that I adored called Come and Go. And that was the first time I had set foot on a film set, was for that one day of shooting. But I can honestly say I've never felt more comfortable anywhere in my life than on that film set, even though I was completely out of my depth and in a sense vulnerable, and the only person on that set who had never done his job before. But I knew exactly what I was doing with the actors, and I did know exactly how to conduct a conversation with the DP in a way that would get us to where we needed to get to visually.
Yeah.
And then there was sort of the two parts of my brain separated very happily, which was that, I suddenly realized that I'd been trying to do close-ups on stage in a way that didn't work. And my theater work improved dramatically, and my film work carried on very happily from that.
Brooklyn's one of my mum's favorite films. Is there a moment that
it's a lot of mothers' favorite films? Yeah, I have the dubious honor of
I love it too. Anyway, but
there you go. I'll take it. I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, Saoirse Ronan, she's one of the greatest working actors today. What stays with you from that?
Absolutely.
What stays with you from that film all these years later?
Oh God. So many things, but like you can start and end if you wanted to with Saoirse, because it was a very special moment in her creative life. I feel that film, where she had some extraordinary success as a younger actor and was tentatively finding her way in the world as a young woman and trying to sort of figure out whether she could make the step from being a brilliant young actor to be, the great, glorious adult actor that she is, and had moved to London in order to do that. And we met about a month before we were due to start rehearsals. And she was very struck by how difficult she was finding having moved away from home, and wasn't immediately connecting it to the role that she was about to play. That there was something, because she'd been going from London and New York all her life, and there was something about that step into adulthood, which had her right in its grip in a way that she didn't quite know what to do with it until she turned and faced the work in the film. And then, I mean, the evidence just screams off that screen. You have an actor who's walking out on a tightrope for the first time, and it's just thrilling to see her talent burst through in that way. So there was such a degree of truthfulness, and she was mining such an authentic level of sort of grief for a younger self that was coming through, and sort of from this chrysalis, this gorgeous young adult powerhouse of an actor stepping forward, who was just going to carry on, and as she does to this day, is carrying on. I would say we could start and end there. It was a difficult shoot because we didn't have enough time, as always. There's never enough time. There's never enough money. So it was tricky. But it's easy to look back and say, oh, you must have known it would work. Nobody really had faith in that film. I mean, it was stitched together from bits of financing from all over the place. I think we had a lot of passes from financiers who said nothing really happens in this film. And in a way, yeah, you could say nothing happens, but in another way, you could say, well, it's a whole life that happens.
Yeah.
So we were able to capture that sense that something small can also have a huge scale. That epic doesn't necessarily mean widescreen sometimes, and yeah.
And to go from a film that you described was about the kindness of strangers at the BAFTAs to a show that's about the maybe the less kindness of people. Just quickly in one sentence, John, how would you describe the world of Black Mirror?
Oh, well, the unkindness of small men.
I like it.
I would say far less poetic than the kindness of strangers,
Yeah.
but there we go.
But just as profound. John, thanks so much for the time today. People watching this can go to derby.com to follow the awards coverage, and all the best of luck with the Emmys for Black Mirror.
Thank you very much, Matt. Lovely to talk to you.